I don't know if I want to say this out loud, but it just landed on me when you said it, because in my opinion, shame is the spiritual realm's version of the physical realm cancer.
Yeah. Yeah.
Cancer manifests in the physical realm the way that shame manifests in the spiritual realm.
With God, there is always more. More love, more life, more freedom. Welcome to Zoe's Exploring More with Michael Thompson. C.S. Lewis once wrote, "Our Heavenly Father has provided many delightful ends for us along our journey, but He takes great care to see that we do not mistake any of them for home." Join me and the team as we explore the kingdom together, discovering the deep truths and offering encouragement for the journey. There is always more.
Welcome, friends and allies, to the Exploring More podcast. Michael Thompson hanging out with SJ Jennings and talking about shame. Shame.
Yeah.
Shame.
It makes me think of, I remember watching a video of Brene Brown talk about her being on an airplane. And, you know, if you want to, you can make chit chat with the person sitting next to you.
What do you do?
What do you do for a living? I'm a shame researcher.
Yeah.
The guy's just kind of like, oh, okay, with his
Yeah.
paper. Nobody really wants to talk about it all that much, but we have found it's really, I think God led us to go into this, and He's just revealing a ton.
SJ, the more we've talked about it, the more, this is the third, I think, episode in this conversation about shame. And the more I've researched, the more I've been taken into my story, the more we had a little preliminary yesterday, you know, that we usually do for 45 minutes to touch base, in 2 hours, you know, just in preparation, and yeah, how important it is, and how significant of an exploration this is to do on Exploring More. I even shout out to my oldest daughter, Ashley, who's a therapist, and talked to her about it for an hour or so, just in her experience with clients, and her own experience, you know, with
life,
with her own story, and just fascinating to hear what she had to offer, and challenging, you know, because as a dad in her story, you know, I was part of some of the shaming,
right?
And it's so much easier to see now, but boy, if we would have known then. And I think I'd like to say to our friends and allies too, as we make this installment, this is going somewhere. This is going somewhere hopeful.
Right.
This is going somewhere relieving. And yet we can't get there any sooner than we can get there. You know, it's kind of the back seat. Hey, when are we going to get there? How long till we get there?
Yeah. Or if you think about it, and you know, you need X-rays to figure out what bones are broken. We were just talking about broken knuckles, but you know, you need those X-rays first, so that you can see not just which ones are broken, but how to set them properly.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. And I think there are more. There are more voices, and I wouldn't mind saying even more qualified to take you deeper into this subject. And yet, I think it's really been good for us to explore more about what shame is, which we'll touch on again, and we have touched on the first two episodes, and its effect. So people, I'm going to shout out again to, you brought up Brene Brown. I mean, somebody who's researched this for a decade and now has been publishing over the last decade. I remember when she hit the
TEDx. Yeah, that TEDx video about vulnerability.
It's
like 2008 or 9,
maybe
at the beginning of YouTube.
Yeah,
but
and how powerful that kind of launched her into that space as an expert. And then, Jay Stringer in his book Unwanted is also another big shout out. And there's others. having experience with something doesn't make you an expert, but it sure makes you qualified to some degree to talk about it. And I think that what I'm not trying to actually advocate for us talking about it. What I'm trying to say is, because all image bearers, all human beings have some association, affiliation, some shame has come at them. You need to talk about it. Mm-hmm. You need to explore that in your own story, not just as some topical, conversation, which we're going to cover. I think a lot of this in different ways. But I hope, particularly in this episode, as we sit down with Caleb and Andy, this is a lot about what's its effect been on us, and what's the story, look like in our lives of shame. So, with that, we'll be right back on the Exploring More podcast.
Heart of the Warrior encounter. The reason why I suggest it to men and try to get them to come to Heart of the Warrior is Heart of the Warrior is the only event I've ever been to in my life where you're amongst a bunch of men, yet you're alone with God. And it gives you time to completely unplug and really come to grips with where you are in your life and talk to God and figure out where you want to go. You will see transformation everywhere at the encounter. You will see people, this happen right before your eyes. And you'll come home energized, and you'll want your family, you'll want your friends, you'll want everybody you come in contact with to enjoy the same gift that you have from going to a Heart of the Warrior encounter.
So, hey man, I love that. Thank you for sharing that, Andy and Caleb. Just a few weeks away from our encounter weekend, and as the release date for this episode, and guys are piling in and making their way, hungry and thirsty, coming, and you'll probably, if you've been to the encounter before, you'll probably hear us talk maybe a little bit more about this, because it's kind of like doing a research paper.
Yeah.
So it's going to make its way into some of our talks and sharing at the weekend. There's no doubt.
No doubt. I don't think I've underestimated it, but I certainly have not had it elevated to the place that it has arrived in the conversation and the research and my own story.
Yeah, in the context of its importance of the way we see the world, the way we enter into relationships. And you and I started reading this book, Unwanted by Jay Stringer, probably 6-8 months ago.
Yeah,
it was before Christmas.
Yeah.
And it's been a big one in terms of revealing some things and how they're operating in the background potentially.
I like how you said that, operating in the background.
Mm-hmm.
Just as we just kind of ease into the water, I love what my daughter reminded me of, that shame is always it's always a part of a relational moment. That it needs others to have its real impact. And I thought a lot about that, and feel like there's something in me that I think at a young age would have to wrestle with the right thing, the wrong thing, not,
which translates immediately to the good thing, the bad thing.
Right.
The moral judgment,
the acceptable and the unacceptable.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And yet, if there's not somebody relationally present in that dynamic, I wonder even how that would, C.S. Lewis talks about in Mere Christianity, the moral compass. So there is something in us that, if Lewis is right, that God has placed in there of right and wrong, good and bad, and a morality, that is shared. That's his big argument. Several chapters in Mere Christianity before he even gets to Christianity.
Yeah.
But because we're made relational, and because relationships are so formative and motivating, and that's what love is very, very much about, is relationship. I think this is. I think she's right that there are ways in which a relationship is shame is coming to you in that either judgment or criticism or punitive.
Yeah, we could do a whole episode just about this.
So,
because just to take it a step further, I 100% agree with what Ash is saying in that moment, and I would say, yeah. We are made for relationship, and if you're just talking about your relationship with God, right?
Yeah.
He doesn't bring shame to you. Now, he might bring conviction.
Yeah.
And we don't necessarily need to go down into that tangent right now.
Not yet.
Not yet.
Yes.
He might bring conviction, but he's not going to bring the feeling of shame accompanied, by the messages that are delivered. So there's always a relational moment. There's always someone that is delivering a shameful message to you. They're bringing that package.
Yeah.
Because they're carrying their interpretation of what happened to them, their false self, their judgment upon you. I remember Tom's story, his dad saying, I would never even think of saying something like that, you just said.
That was part of the punishment that our friend endured.
The shame he put on him for something he said. So, yeah, and if you think just because there's not another party in the room to deliver a message of shame, right? The enemy can come around.
Yeah.
The voices of people that have spoken to you in your history can come back to you in a moment without them even being there.
Yeah.
And you're brought back to this place of shameful behavior. So I love the way she said that, and 100% of her.
And then I found this from Nietzsche. He was asked, what do you regard as most humane? What do you regard as most humane? He said, to spare someone shame.
Wow.
To spare someone shame. I think about our definition for wounding and wounding moments. Can you give it your best shot at quoting what we talk about in the absence?
Yeah. Absolutely. The moment where you're brought shame, guilt, condemnation in the absence of care.
Yeah, in the absence of care, and I think Brene Brown is right along in that conversation, in the absence of care. So the human experience is one of failure. Mm-hmm. I'm sorry to break that to anybody.
And if you're just going, yeah, welcome to the party.
The human experience is one of failure, multiple failures, and that is where shame can have its moment.
And where I'm thinking about my friend, and I call her my friend because I've spent a lot of time with her through her books and things. Brene Brown says there's an opportunity to build resiliency, shame resiliency, right? So there's a way to counteract that thing, and that's coming.
And how do you learn to do that if you're not taught how? I mean, there is a resilient nature, but it has to be.
Has to be taught.
It has to be.
You have to be taught what you need to be resilient from.
Over and over and over in this series, I go back to Good Will Hunting.
Oh, yeah.
And
it's all about shame.
And how and we'll get there, how that moment frees him from the voice, the presence, the pressure of shame. And what shame really does is creates these self-destructive, harm, patterns. And so that's why this research and exploration, that's why I'm like, this is way bigger, man. I mean, I knew it was big. I think it's bigger. I'm not looking at a mountain. I'm looking at a mountain range.
Yeah.
when it comes to this subject.
A color that comes from that, and it's one of those things. Like now that we are really giving it our focus, we can't not see it. Like I'm even thinking about Good Will Hunting, and the moment when Will is revealing to Sean that he was abused.
Yeah, that's what exactly.
You got experience with that? No. Do you have experience with that? Like, did it happen to you? Because if it didn't happen to you, I don't really want to hear what you have to say.
I know. Yeah, it's a powerful way, I think, to acknowledge this in the absence of care. You know, and if you don't have experience with something, it doesn't disqualify you. But if you do have experience with something, it actually enables a kind and caring voice. So
just to bring it back to Nietzsche, right? That if you don't have experience with something, it doesn't mean you can't operate in such a way that doesn't bring shame to another person.
Yeah.
So when I share with someone that I'm experiencing flashbacks from post-traumatic stress, and they look at me like, what are you talking about? Are you mentally ill or something?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You look fine to me.
They're reinforcing what's wrong with you.
What's wrong with you?
That voice, that
exactly. Look. I mean, that's bringing shame to a moment when someone's trying to be vulnerable. One of the guys on our Wednesday morning group shared about it the other day. Same thing.
Yeah.
The reaction of someone that brought shame to
Ashley used this other term, SJ, that I really liked. She said shame is disintegrating.
Yes.
So if the hope is wholeheartedness, integrated with all the parts and pieces of me, all the ages that I've been, you know, and bringing, the healing love of God to all of those places, it's going to take some time. And yet I think that is a really great definition of shame disintegrates. Mm-hmm. And there's that other word, disintegrate. Mm-hmm. But
dissociate.
Yes, all of those things.
Yeah.
And
I'm thinking about how now we need to rewrite our listening guide again to include some of this. It's incredible.
The other idea I think too about shame's voice is and just as a little bit of review along with some other new things that we're talking about, is it is in its essence there's something wrong with you, and it's berating is a good word for it. It's very, very disintegrating. It's the knowledge in a moment that you wanted something else other than that, whatever happened, and yet it's so twisted so quickly with. Honestly, and what happened is your fault.
Oh yeah.
So it's just a sinister. And I get if there is any redeeming quality about shame, it is how do I not get that again? So how do I protect myself? How do I promote myself in a way? And so. There's, the makings, at least the beginning makings of what we would call the false self, or the masks that I need to wear to protect myself.
I mean, there's a big difference between feeling ashamed about something and that is really, really nuanced and complicated. Like, where does that feeling of being ashamed come from? You got to explore all that. But there's a big difference between feeling ashamed of something and someone saying shame on you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? Like there's just there's a big difference between the two of those. And when I say something and it comes out of my mouth and I'm like, no, come back. And feeling ashamed about that.
Yeah, convicted. It's
as a synonym. So close, man. It's a razor's edge, of that.
Feeling that wish that I hadn't said that or done that, well, that's a good thing. It's better. It's better than the alternative. Like,
right.
well, you deserve that. Or
but take that to its end, right?
Right.
And which direction are you going? I did a wrong thing, or is there something wrong about me?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And I think the gravitational pull to something's wrong with me seems to be part of this human condition.
No doubt.
Over the timeline. Listen, I parceled this together about shame. This was borrowing from a few different, but shame capitalizes on wounding moments, or as Ashley said, disintegrating moments. Shame capitalizes on wounding moments, then perpetuates the wounding indefinitely. So it leaves a mark.
That feels true to
we
me.
We're talking about our fingers. Mine was a month and a half ago.
Mine was 20
years ago. Still
there.
Still. So it is the maintenance. Shame is the maintenance program of many hurtful moments. Right? That still have a presence, that still have power, that still have an effect. Whether you let go or you battle against it, take your pick. But address shame you must.
Wow.
Right? This idea of being in a stream or a river, I think there's two things. One is as something's coming at you, you can, like Neo, right? No, when you're ready, you won't have to dodge bullets. But there is a letting something go. But this other thing is, why does that keep coming down river at me?
Yeah, who's chucking those logs in the water?
Who is throwing that, at me, and why does it have the power that it has? So I think that's where you can. The battle is not to punch it and break it up as much as the battle might be to stop it in the power of that current, and see what it is.
Right. What's the address label?
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
The not where who it's being delivered to, where it came from.
Yeah.
Right.
C.S. Lewis says this: I sometimes think that shame, mere awkward and senseless shame, does as much toward preventing good acts and straightforward happiness as any of our vices could.
Yeah, for sure. I think the vices are way downstream from that. I think that's C.S. Lewis's point. That's your point, 100%.
And yet I love what you're saying. If you're saying this, I think, and they're related.
Of course,
the things that happen that shame us, we have got to turn to comfort somewhere.
Survival.
What can I get to soothe this? This voice, this weight, and this pain. And so, we have our addictions, our vices, as Lewis says.
And our false self.
Right.
Right. So I want to turn to this question if we can.
Yeah.
What does experiencing shame do to my identity? So
yeah.
Everything that you're talking about, right?
And I go to something that we peddle, we peddle and offer quite a bit. What does it do to my identity? It arrests it. It gives me a false identity that somehow feels comfortable in its ability to either protect or provide, at least in that moment of that experience. So I think it leads to, for me, something to hide, something to prove, and something to fear.
Yeah, absolutely, man.
So that's the result of my identity being compromised. Is now my behavior often will be destructive, self-centered. Yes. How do I get out of this? How do I stop this? Is it flight? Is it fight, or is it freeze? And it's so raw that it's actually like that.
Yeah, sure.
You are now,
especially initially,
caught, right?
It's that, and because a lot of times these things happen when we're young. So then the echo of that, the after effect of that is, so there's that wounding, shaming moment, and we've talked about this many, many, many times. There's a cycle to, you create the the wounding moment happens in an aura of shame, a cloud of shame. There's an agreement made, and there's a vow, I will always, I will never.
And those are binding.
And then there's your false self.
And they're bound.
Right. And so all of that plays into either finding an identity that works for you or creating one.
Yeah.
And that's how I said it on our pregame call yesterday. That's how the theft of identity happens.
Right.
The enemy comes to steal, kill, and destroy. What do you think he's coming to steal, kill, and destroy? It's not your stuff. Might be your family, your relationships. What he's really after is your identity.
You. Yeah. I think of shame. It's caused me to lose self-respect and honor. Shame makes love conditional. And, if it's having its moment, not just in the wounding moment, but if you're right, and that wounding moment is now becoming part of my internal system. And there's a lot of good in the internal systems, but if there is some compromise and some infection's a good word. That finger still hurts.
Well, I'm going right to IT and computers, and those systems are designed to work a certain way. But right now, where we live right now in the in-between, they're corruptible.
Yeah.
And viruses can get in. And yes, if you don't get that healed, if it doesn't heal right, infection's there too. So both metaphors for sure.
It's just, so the compromise of my identity is I think what the enemy's after, to see love as conditional and somehow up to me. To develop strategies now that I'm not, to try to prevent myself from being hurt. I mean, that is shame motivated in so many ways. And of course, who wants to get hurt?
Nobody.
Who wants to be rejected?
Right.
Especially
when you're younger.
And so you learn, and I think it goes back to this experiment that we've been privy to. You get 5 and 6 year olds in a room and you ask a question, all their hands go up.
Oh, yeah.
They can't wait to tell you.
Yeah, unashamed.
It is the ooh, ooh, ooh.
Right. Naked and unashamed.
You put 10 years on them.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
You put 10 years and you get in that same classroom and now
14,
they're 16,
15 years old.
And you ask a question, crickets. What happened?
Right.
What happened? So I think the last thing I want to say about the false self, and I think it's a delicate comment about how do you handle that with self-care, but at the same time, how do you understand that this is not good? This is actually preventing you from connecting, with others and connecting with God. So
being known and
right, all of that.
Yeah.
And I think I want to just say about God real quick. I think the Shack did us a huge favor and honored, here's Papa and Mac, the scene. And it's early in the film where Mac is projecting on the figure God, Papa. I thought you liked punishing people.
His misunderstanding.
That was his belief, right? And I looked this quote up because I remembered it was we were preparing. He's talking. I thought you liked punishing people, and Papa says, Mac, you have me all wrong. I don't need to punish people for sin. Sin is enough punishment of its own, right? Shame is enough.
Absolutely.
I'm not shaming you, but when people sin, right, there is this snake in the garden that is very much about not only bringing about shame, but then projecting that shaming on the most loving being in the story.
That's right.
So now it's really confusing.
Yeah.
Right? So he says, Papa says, Sin is its own punishment, devouring you from the inside.
Yeah, and that's the where that we found this quote too, and I don't remember where it came from, so forgive me.
He says, "It's not my purpose. It's not my purpose to punish it. It's my joy to cure it."
Right. Shame derives its power from being unspeakable.
Yes.
So you're convinced in that moment, whatever Mac's shame was, right? And you know the story, but the man, it's not all about the loss of his daughter and his desire to kill her assailant.
Yeah,
there's way more to it, and his
story
journey and
his
story,
father's stories in there,
his father's story,
and to
all
have
of
it
that.
happen on his watch. That's where shame is over.
Absolutely
Run him,
and he can't say it, right? So that's this is the thing about shame. Like, how many times have we heard a guy say this? If I told you what I've done,
you'd run. Yeah. You wouldn't want to be with me.
You'd call the cops. You'd do this. You wouldn't want to be. You wouldn't want to hear what I
or
have
what's
to
been
say.
done, or what's been done.
What's
to me.
been done to me. That's right.
Yeah.
So the power of a man saying, or a woman, in the right context, I've never told anyone this. I guarantee you, dude. I'll bet my truck. That statement is always tied to something shameful.
Yeah.
Always.
And of course, you got to be careful who you share that with.
Of course.
Of
course.
Because
I would say that is 1% of people who have said that are like, I'm trying to be mindful of who I share this with. No, it's been cloaked in a shroud of secrecy because they're ashamed.
Yeah.
So let's just share, as we've got a few minutes left, what was a first experience with shame? Or, I don't know if I can remember the first one.
Yeah.
But God, as we were talking, God brought one to my memory that I hadn't thought about in a long time. But what about you?
Yeah. So the first one I can remember, I was couldn't have been much more than 4, maybe 5. And as a little guy, riding my bike in the apartment complex that we lived in, and was told, do not go down to the swimming pool. So kind of like the tree in the middle of the garden. I'm not sure I was even thinking about going to the swimming pool, but anyway, ended up on my bike down there, and there was a ball, as kids are playing with balls. Now I'm in clothes. I'm not there with my parents, and I'm not really supervised, which is typical of the late 60s.
Right.
And but a ball came up against the side of the pool, and I reached to get it to help. I was gonna, throw it back into play or whatever, and I fall in.
Oh.
Now I am soaked from head to toe.
Could you swim?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think so. I wasn't far from the side. So I am a little bit all kind of taken up by this, I'm all wet. I've fallen in the pool. I'm not sure I had the capacity even at that point to know what had just happened and quote the disobedience.
Mm-hmm.
So I ride home, but I might have developed this story on my ride home, or it might have come to me in the moment if I was that sharp at 4 or 5. But I come in, I don't even come in the house. I knock on the door of the apartment where my mom is inside with my younger brother. And I am, soaking wet.
Knock on the door.
And it is
interesting.
Honey, what happened? I knew I wasn't supposed to be at the pool, so I said, I rode my bike through some puddles. I think my mom, if I remember it, maybe I'm embellishing. I think she closed the door a little bit, laughed behind, came back around, really? And then it was kind of, are you lying, kind of thing. And so then it goes pretty dark, because what happened next was, for lying, spankings, and a pretty. That's my first memory of punishment, and how confusing and how disruptive and how, and there was nothing funny about it.
Yeah.
And how, to be left in your room then till somebody's going to come get you
to think about it, or think about
all
what you
that.
did. Yeah.
It just I think to Ashley's point, it was so disintegrating and dysregulating. Yeah, the confusion. What are you gonna think? It's not just I did something wrong. I think that was my first, or shame. The black ooze that kind of hits Spider-Man. I mean, that was kind of the first real bruising and encounter with shame. And then there were more. That's kind of how my family operated. And 3 boys, 5 years apart. There were a lot of spankings and things that happened to us that fear, I think, is a gateway to shame, and then shame reinforces fear. So they have this dance. I think anger, I can remember hating my mom and dad as a boy for the way they're making me feel.
Right. And for the way that and you couldn't articulate this then, but I'm thinking about, 5-year-old Mikey. You didn't ask me how I felt about being embarrassed in front of all the neighborhood kids.
There was no dialogue.
None of that.
No. And it was we're of that generation, 60s and 70s kids. I mean, man, parents, crud, man, even grandparents. I mean, I knew kids. I saw kids get spanked in front of, in the street by
at birthday parties.
So it doesn't make it right. It was prevalent, is what I'm saying. There
100%.
was a lot of that punitive system, and I do think that shame is punishing. This is back to the quote: "Sin is enough punishment of its own." Mistakes, and we just said earlier, life is full of failures, and to be told, right, the old covenant way, do's and don'ts, and then punishment, man. It can leave a mark. So that was one of my first encounters.
Well, man, mine doesn't go back quite that far, but I think I was probably 9 or 10 years old, 4th or 5th grade, and we took a field trip to the mall, Cape Cod Mall, because that was pretty much all there was to do in the wintertime. So we hike over there. Now, I don't remember what time of year it was or what the heck we were doing there. I just remember going. And maybe it was close to Christmas, and we were going to go look at toys. I don't know what it was, man. But we were at the mall. I remember that. And so, my whole busload of kids, we get there, we go in, whatever we do. That's not the part I remember. The part I remember is the bus leaving without me.
Crap.
Yeah, and I'm not a little guy, but I'm like 9.
Yeah.
So the bus is gone, and again, I don't remember where I was, or did I wander off? Did they just take off? I don't remember.
Who had the clipboard with the count?
Come on, man, right? And I mean, that's like 4th grade,
Yeah, that's about right.
So then it's going, I don't remember details. God just brought this memory back to me 20 minutes ago. I don't remember if I went and found a cop, or a cop found me, or it was a security guard, or what it was. But somehow I end up on the payphone calling home, what do you mean you're still at the mall? I was picking you up at the school and blah, blah, blah. And, getting read a little bit of the riot act, and then showing up and, back of the car, not like, man, that must have been scary or any of that. It was like, what were you doing? What were you thinking? What's wrong with you? Like, why'd you leave the group?
Yeah.
All of that kind of interrogation. And so, again, I told you that God just brought this back to my memory. I think that's been my whole deal of, when are we leaving? We're going to be ready to go 5 minutes early, and I'm going to be first. I'm driving. I'm loading the truck. Nobody's leaving without me.
Yeah.
And when I feel like I'm being left behind, it's like a panic.
Right. Sure.
Comes up in me. So I felt pretty ashamed shamed in that moment for that being my fault somehow.
Yeah. Well, and your glory of protecting and, Enneagram 8 and the things that are, you want to make sure everybody and everything gets there safely and gets back. I mean, it's so, you said earlier,
the piece of the puzzle,
the razor's edge,
Yeah, it's a piece of the puzzle, though.
If I'm not there,
why am I militant about that?
Yeah, and that's the wildness of it. Let me read this quote by Stringer in Unwanted. A family system that was characterized as rigid and or disengaged, right? So you could have been ignored the whole way, silent treatment, and that dysregulate. Children in these homes learn that rules are not like barriers around the Grand Canyon to keep people from dying. They are more the scarlet letters given to shame you into compliance.
Yeah, next episode I'll share you a story when that happened.
So what did that, what are some of these systems? Here's the family system. What is that teaching? What's that promoting? And I'm not trying to line all these up. I think the case I want to make real quick is how much of this your heart has been exposed to, men and women, boys and girls.
Battered.
So your family system is one, right? Rigid or disengaged. The other systems that I was really subject to that reinforced a lot of this was the religious system. That was full of punitive punishment reminders. And the athletic system, right? The grading systems, and I could just go on and on with the ways in which, and the environments. When I say system, it's an environment. Church is an environment. School's an environment. And man, when you get somewhere beyond 3rd and 4th grade and into 7th grade, all of a sudden, the judgments, accusations, and all that can come really, really thick. And the one about religion that I want to
we're subjected to these judgmental systems.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Well, where I was going to go with that is the significance of the sinner, the sin and sinner. And when that is the primary message of the religious space or the religious system, there's no way that doesn't produce shame.
Right. Theft of identity.
And so now back to, we've said this before, now it's not about being loved by God, it's being protected from his wrath. And in this gospel that's promoted, thank you that Jesus took all the beatings. Again, if you continue that narrative, if it's a punitive gospel as opposed to a liberating or relieving gospel, in which it's not sinners, we'll talk about this next time, but not sinners saved by grace, but rather orphaned sons and daughters brought back home. It produces a very different experience and relationship with God by those who are actually supposed to be brokering the very message. And so, I think
we are prodigal sons and daughters.
And if sin is the big deal, and that's who we are, then why the big fuss about sinning?
Right.
That doesn't make sense to me. Back to your question at the beginning about identity, what does it do to your identity? If I have to take on and am forced to take on this identity of sinner for this gospel equation to work, in this religious system that's teaching it. Back to Seabiscuit. What is it? What did it train him to do? Lose.
Yeah,
lose.
Man. Yeah.
So the training is really a wild idea of what do these different systems, these different environments teach you and reinforce. And man, it wasn't till my late 30s. I think you came along after me, but it was still in your late 30s.
Yeah.
That there was liberation
38.
from that in a larger gospel that began to kind of reconstruct and deconstruct. Actually, deconstruct's a good word.
Yeah.
Take some of those pieces off,
Dismantle
and dismantle that so that the love of God could be received. So, I think being a loved boy is a way better idea, and a way better antidote to shame.
Oh yeah.
And
the restoration of all things includes the restoration of our identity.
Yeah.
And we are loved boys and daughters, boys and girls. Not the point isn't for us to strive to be good.
Yeah.
That's the Old Testament.
Yeah. So in thinking about this, Andy's given us the 2-minute warning.
Yeah,
or maybe
10 minutes ago.
2 minutes ago. But I just want to. This made me think of a character in the Harry Potter series named Dobby, who's the house elf.
Dobby's the best.
And I thought
he's awesome.
He's awesome. But the wild part that I think about Dobby in relationship to shame.
Yeah.
So he is the Malfoy's servant, right? And they just treat him like scourge, you know. I mean, so they whack him and punish him.
Yeah.
To the point then that even when Dobby's with Harry and he's not committing some house elf crime with Harry, he starts taking stuff and whacking himself in the head with it.
Yeah.
Because he's trained.
He's trained.
So I think that is a.
And his glory is hidden, and his power and authority is hidden.
So when he's free by the sock, you know,
yes,
he now becomes a part of the liberation, you know, in this Harry Potter series. But the thing that I want to close with about Dobby is, he has been so shamed that when he makes a mistake, he takes the book and whacks himself. He takes the club and hits himself. And I think that's the perpetuating thing that Ashley was talking about earlier about shame then starts to have a way of its own. And you don't even get to choose whether it's right or wrong, or failure is part of the human experience, and because there's people there to help you learn how. No, if there's people and voices, and they don't even have to be there, but if you're hearing your dad or you're hearing your mom or you're hearing your teachers and coaches, those are those voices of shame that we've got to identify and come out from under their power. Otherwise, their power is actually going to leave us to a self-destructive behavior. I'm either going to go spend money to soothe. I'm going to go eat. I'm going to go work out. I'm going to go
work 90 hours a week.
Go to work. I'm going to go get close to someone, you know, sexually or pornographically in order to soothe. And so that's why the
drink, smoke.
Yes,
get into fights. I mean,
these are the stories.
Will Hunting again, right?
Right. So,
you just made me remember. So I'm thinking about my mom today. Anyway, it was 3 years ago today. She died
today.
Yeah,
I have that on my calendar. Yes.
Well, thank you for having that on there.
Well, I haven't talked to you about it. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. You just when you talked about hitting ourselves in the head. I got to spend in the last few years of my mom's life trying to help her get free of it. But she would drop something on the floor or bump into something, and she said, "You idiot."
Yeah, the script.
I'm like, Mom, don't talk about yourself that way. You're not an idiot.
Right. I'm unlovable.
Who told you that?
I'm an idiot. I'm unlovable. This is the voices of shame. I'm a bad person. I'm a failure. I don't deserve goodness, happiness, whatever. Right? I'm not important. I mean, these are the these are the things that, shame can have a huge impact. I think anger, fear, and an unkindness. You're talking about an unkindness. So if you're unkind with yourself, it's a rare person that then can be kind with other people.
Also, if you heard someone speak to you
the way you speak
or
to
someone
you,
else that you care about, the way you speak to yourself, would you
allow it?
Would you allow that? Or would you be like, don't talk to my friend that way?
Right.
That's one of the things I said to my mom. If somebody else was calling you an idiot, what do you think I would do to them?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. You'd confront them at Walmart. You're like, hey, bud, right.
Who do you think you're talking to?
So, but the inability.
But somehow we get into this trap of thinking, well, I deserve to be talked that way.
Right, the inability.
So we speak to ourselves that way.
I believe this to my bones, that you do need somebody to help you learn how to advocate for yourself until you learn to.
That's right.
And so to see some of this, and this is where we're heading. We got one more deep dive into one more episode before we start to move east towards the sun for some of the healing that we need. But I think this is enough for now.
Yeah.
And we touched on it just a little bit. So in the next episode, we want to cover some of the things that happen when sexual abuse and other things, become part of shame's path into wounding us deeply. So we got that to look forward to in the next episode. Yeah. But it's such a part of our lives and so many others' lives. It's important that we hit it. So thank you for joining us on the Exploring More podcast. I pray that this is helpful in some way, and that seeing it. Here's the point of 4 episodes to get. Which will be 4th in the next episode. You have to see it. Right. You have to be tired of it hurting. Mm-hmm. You have to be able to even observe it in order, I think, to let it go, let it not have its reinforcing moment when life's moments allow it to. And you got to break some of these cycles. So you got to see these cycles first. That's why we're elaborating like we are in this, and to understand it. Man, if everybody has this disease to some degree or another, and there was an antidote or something even preventative for it, crap, where's that drive-through? Where's that line?
I don't know if I want to say this out loud, but it just landed on me when you said it because of the way you said what you just said. So I wonder, because I'm saying that more and more often. In my opinion, shame is the spiritual realm's version of the physical realm cancer.
Yeah.
Cancer manifests in the physical realm the way that shame manifests in the spiritual realm.
I think it's a very safe alignment of those realities, because shame can be so self-destructing. Once the club is given to you, and now you're just waiting for the next opportunity to have to reinforce the very thing that you don't want.
Right.
That is not wanted for you by the one who made you. So thanks for being with us. I think this drops before Encounter, yeah?
Yep, on the 5th.
So there's like 5 spots left. A couple weeks from now, I'm telling you, there's only going to be about 5 spots left.
Shoot us an email, support@zoe.org. We know a guy.
Yeah, we know a guy.
That'll get you in.
Yeah, just tell it, hey, I'm on the secret program of the Exploring More podcast.
That's
SJ
right.
said so. So we'll get you in. Hey, we'll see you next time on the Exploring More podcast.
We hope you have enjoyed this episode of Exploring More. The landing page for this podcast is zoe.org/podcast. That's ZOWEH.org/podcast, where you can find the show notes and various platforms to which we broadcast. You can also find us and the Life of More by visiting Zoe on YouVersion Bible app, Right Now Media, our Facebook page, and Zoe on Instagram and Twitter. Remember, with God there is always more, and you were made for more.